Moving on to our next session of today's evening, we have Dr. Vinayachandra ji, who will be sharing his insights on the title Leading from Within, Significance of Self-Awareness in Bharatiya Thought. Dr. Vinayachandra ji is a friend of mine personally. I'm so blessed to be with him today on this session. He is the co-founder and director of Indica Yoga, Bengaluru. He holds a PhD in psychological insights from the Vedas and has a strong background in Sanskrit, English, yogic science, and applied psychology. He's trained in traditional Gurukulam education for 6 years, and he's a dedicated teacher who travels globally, conducting courses and workshops on yoga, psychology, and Sanskrit. He's been a guest faculty at various universities and yoga associations in Belgium, Switzerland, Germany, Israel, China, Ireland, Italy, and I have a list that goes on. He has more than 2 decades of experience in research, teaching, and policy formulation. He has served as a senior consultant to the committee to draft the national education policy. Sir is also a co-founder of Indica Yoga, which offers authentic yoga experiences and training. He is also a member of the founding team of Chanakya University, and he holds a key position there as chief consultant on strategic initiatives and director for Center for Indian Knowledge Systems, Chanakya University. So I uh, warmly welcome Dr. Vinay Chandra ji for this session. Over to you, Vinay Chandra ji.
Namaste. It's a pleasure to join you all this evening on 9-day exploration, which is a part of Navaratri conversations on a lecture series. I've been following these lectures for 2 years now, and it's come very well to be part of this series this year. I'm grateful to friends at SES, Gaurish, Bhavya, and many other colleagues, Soumya, and many other colleagues from SES who have extended this warm invitation to join you all this evening. So, looking forward to this conversation. My topic specifically is leading from within, the significance of self-awareness in Bharatiya thought. I don't know if there is any other focus area that is so significant, that is given such a high place in the overall scheme of things in the Bharatiya thought compared to self-awareness.
Sorry to interrupt, Vinay Chandra ji. Your voice is breaking. Maybe if you want to switch off your video, will the voice be more clearer?
I can try that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But before we look into those aspects, I want to start with a question. Who is the hardest person you will ever have to lead? If you just think about this question, is it the team that I am taking care of now? Perhaps not. Is it the family? Perhaps not so much, because they do really listen to my words. Is it the organization that I am heading? Maybe because of my position, they will follow me. The hardest person that I ever would have to lead is myself. That's the toughest thing compared to anything else. And this, our tradition recognize it in a very significant manner. Look at the stretches of statements, quotations, utterances across, whether it is the Gita, whether it's the Upanishad. There's one idea that is recurrent, that gets reinforced again and again, is this central message. What? The verse that the sixth chapter of the Gita presents before us. Uddhared atmana atmanam, natmanam avasadayet, atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu, atmaiva ripuratmanaha. One must elevate oneself by oneself, for the self is one's own friend and the self is one's own enemy. So this clearly positions the focus on oneself to the most central place. Okay, it is very profound. It reminds us very clearly that before you lead others, you must first learn to lead yourself, and that requires self awareness. In some other context, Sri Aurobindo brings out this idea in two important terminologies. While he is describing the work of yoga, he says it has a twofold purpose. What is it? One is Swarajya, attainment of Swarajya, and then Samrajya. Both are not used in the common sense. When he says Swarajya, he is referring to the mastery over oneself. Swasmin, in one's own self, in the glory of oneself, one is able to gain mastery of oneself. So that is Swarajya. When that is established well, when that is taken care of well, then what follows is Samrajya, the ability to influence, the ability to inspire, the ability to lead the outside world. Unless the internal world is taken care of, the external world is not in your command. So this is what comes about in many places in the Indian tradition, not once, but again and again, to emphasize the importance of this particular idea. So today, this evening, again, it's also interesting that today is the second day of of Navaratri, that is dedicated to Brahmacharini. Brahmacharini is the one who oversees learning, education, reflection. On this day, we are reflecting on some important questions around life and living. So, in this session on leading from within, the significance of self awareness in Bharatiya thought, we will travel through these three ideas. What is it? First one, what self awareness really means in our tradition. Why is it central to leadership? And how can we cultivate it in practical ways even in today's world? Because many a times we dismiss things saying that, okay, this is not applicable to our current times. It could have been valid at some point of time, but maybe not so applicable in our times. It is something that we dismiss off about certain things. But in this case, probably there's something very profound and easily accessible which we can bring it to our own lives. That's what we'll be looking into. So to begin with, what is self awareness in Bharatiya thought? This is what we need to see, because self awareness is not only a central concept in the Indian tradition, or not only in the Western tradition, but even in modern psychology, in modern management, it is emerging as one of the central concepts. Today, leadership is defined by emotional intelligence. What are the characteristics, or what are the components of emotional intelligence? The first one, or the foundational one, is self awareness, followed by self regulation, followed by empathy, followed by social skills, followed by motivation. So, these are the five important components of emotional intelligence which goes into the making of a right leadership. And of all of them, the first one that stands out is self awareness. Go to the Western tradition where it all began from. What does the Delphi of the Oracle say? It is know thyself. Okay, knowing oneself is central. Similarly, what does the Indian tradition say? Go back to the Upanishads. Atmanam Vidhi. I mean, exactly, they are so similar and same. Atmanam Vidhi and know thyself in the Eastern and the Western. But what has the Indian Eastern has much more to offer into this schema. We will look into it shortly. So, when we say self awareness in the modern context, we normally refer to being conscious of one's sense, one's strengths, weaknesses, your habits, your emotional triggers, your patterns, your drives, and your motivators. Being aware of these aspects is generally considered to be self awareness. While this is useful, Bharatiya thought, Indian thought, goes way beyond these initial layers. It goes much deeper. In fact, there are multiple stories that you come across again in the Upanishad and elsewhere, helping us to understand the multi-layered personality or multi-dimensional personality of human phenomenon. So what does it say? The layers of awareness that we carry or that we can obtain. First one is Sharira or Annamaya, the awareness about the body. What are the needs of my body? What are the requirements of the body? And to be able to distinguish between them, to know what are the weaknesses, what are the strengths, again to be able to distinguish between them. So, all this is part of the awareness about the body. Then comes a subtle layer, what is generally called as pranamaya kosha or prana, or whichever way it is expressed in different texts. There's a whole layer of awareness about our life energy. What are our subliminal motivators? What are our triggers? What gives us joys? So identifying these experiences and their sources come into this particular layer of prana. Then comes the layer or awareness of manas, awareness of our thoughts and emotions. They fall into this layer, followed by buddhi, or even sometimes called as vijnanamaya kosha. These are different names to that layer, but basically it's the layer of awareness of our intellect. What do I hold to be essential? What do I hold to be valuable? What do I hold to be of significance? What do I prioritize? What is the reasoning I use to get into that level? So these are the kinds of awarenesses that are present at the buddhi level or vijnanamaya kosha. Then deeper to this layer ultimately is awareness of the deepest self, the unchanging witness, someone who is capable of seeing all that is happening at all these different layers, yet having the awareness that I am different from these external characteristics that I am carrying. So, self awareness then is not just knowing yourself, it is realizing yourself. This is why there is such a emphasis on self-realization in the Indian context. For those who are familiar with the Western models and theories, especially speaking from Abraham Maslow's perspectives, where self-actualization is considered to be the highest reaching point, in the Indian context, it is not self-actualization, but it is self-transcendence and also self-realization. That is the most important aspect. Interestingly, even Maslow, in his later works, moved beyond self actualization. He spoke more about self transcendence, but unfortunately, modern psychology or the management, they were not interested in it. Therefore, they kept those concepts outside their regular course of discussion. This has often happened in the Western world. Look at the works of William James. When he wrote Principles of Psychology, he was held to be one of the founders or fathers of American psychology. But when he wrote the next book, Varieties of Religious Experience, wherein he went into the details of the experiences of some evolved, enlightened beings, immediately he was kept out of the realm of psychology, considering him to be a crazy man. So this has how often happen in the West. What does not fit in their schema is completely excluded and also sometimes labeled as an anomaly. But again, that is not the subject matter of today. So coming back here, it is not just self actualization, but it is realizing oneself or self realization. Therefore, it is a journey. Again, it's not a one time destination, it is a journey from the smaller awareness or the ego based awareness to a higher awareness or higher awareness of the self. And this journey has been illustrated in multiple Upanishads again and again. One of such stories which I am very fascinated about, is the story of Indra and Virochana. Probably many of you would have heard about it. Anytime, every time you read it, it just gives you a new insight into this whole dimension of self awareness. So the story goes like this, something like this. Long ago, both the gods and the demons, that is, the Devas and the Asuras, wanted to know what is true self. What is the true self? So both of them decide, we will send our heads to seek answer to this question. So the Devas decided to send Indra, the Asuras decided to send Virochana. Both of them go to Prajapati, the creator, the Brahman, with this question. And it so happens that they have been asked to stay in the Gurukulam or in the place of Prajapati, again emphasizing knowledge is not something you get instantly. It's not instant noodles. You will have to put efforts for it. So they lived with him in discipline for 32 years, and at the end, Prajapati gives his first teaching. He says, Ya esho akshni purusho drishyate. The person you see in your reflection, in water or in a mirror, this is the self. It's a simple one line response that Prajapati gives. The person you see in your reflection, in water or in a mirror, that is the self. Both of them got the same answer. Virochana was immediately satisfied. He rushed back to his place and declared, the body is the self. Because when I see in a mirror or when I see my reflection in water, what do I see? I see my body. So, body is the self. Therefore, decorate it, feed it, indulge it. That is the highest truth. The message was revealed to all his followers. So, all his followers were extremely happy and started to do those things. And that is where the Asuric philosophy came into existence. Materialism, obsession with the physical, living only for the body or focusing only on the requirements of the body, so on and so forth. Indra also had the same response. He comes back and starts reflecting on this response. If the body is the self, then when the body ages or dies, the self would also perish. That cannot be true. So he goes back to Prajapati. No, you have not given the right answers. Somewhere it seems to be misleading. Can you tell more about it? Having heard this, Prajapati said, the self is the one who enjoys in dreams. Again, this was quite uh, ambiguous. Indra accepts this, listens, and starts reflecting. Says, but in dreams, it's not that we only enjoy it, we also suffer. The pain is as real as the pain that happens during the daytime. Dreams are fleeting and unreliable, so that cannot be ultimate. There must be something more to it. Tell me more. So he goes back to Prajapati. Okay, Prajapati is happy that there is this seeker who is inquiring, pursuing his inquiry in this manner. So next he says, the self is the one who exists in deep sleep, free from pain and desire. Indra thought, but in deep sleep we know nothing. If self awareness means unconsciousness, what is the use of that? it, it was not just adding up. So he says, no, this can't be. While I can see, understand something, but still this is not the entire story. There must be more to this. So he goes back to Prajapati, and the story says that he stayed there for much longer period, for decades and decades and decades. And then, having ascertained that Indra is a rightful candidate to receive this knowledge, it is then Prajapati reveals the true self is not the body, not the dreamer, not even the sleeper. It is the seer, the knower, beyond pleasure and pain, beyond birth and death. It is pure consciousness, immortal and free. Ah, Indra feels it was worth the pursuit. Having stayed long on this path, I have found something that no one else has found. It's such a valuable, treasured knowledge that I have got. So he comes back and shares this message with his followers. Indra realized the truth, but Virochana, who had been satisfied with the very first superficial explanation he never retained and remained in ignorance. Again, telling us, revealing before us that the way we understand, perceive the world, the response, the signs, everything differs from one to the other significantly, and the whole world we build out of it is a consequence of those perceptions. Again, which comes from self awareness. So, what does the story tell us? On one side, it says that Virochana represents shallow self awareness, stopping at the surface, mistaking the body, the positions, or image as the self. Such leaders get trapped in ego, in appearances, in positions, and all the authority that they draw it from these sources. Whereas Indra represents that authentic self inquiry, refusing easy answers that come on the path, questioning deeper until he realized the true nature of the self. Okay, such leaders develop clarity, balance, and wisdom. We will see how this idea gets reinforced in the Gita or in the other places too. So, in our tradition, coming back to our initial question, so in our tradition, self awareness is not a personality test or a quick insight, because in the modern understanding there are some quick tests that you can undertake and also come up with a score to say, oh, this is my self awareness quotient. But here it is not something like that. While that can be a good start, stopping there could be problematic, just like Virochana. Here it is a lifelong journey of peeling away layers. There are so many layers that you have that we have accumulated over period, over decades, over many years. So peeling off is the most important thing. Just to add in here, in the Western psychology, ego construction is an important process. Here, while ego construction is an important process, stopping there is problematic. We move towards ego deconstruction. The whole story is from ego construction to deconstruction. I can't end it just at the fully constructed level. That is one level of maturity, but going further is, or it also involves deconstructing it. That is what we mean by peeling off the layers which we have accumulated. And that depth makes all the difference between, as we see in the case of Virochana and Indra, one is a fragile leader and other one is a fearless one. So what impact it will have on leadership is that anyone who has touched the deeper layers of self awareness is a fearless one, an authentic one who has just scratched the surface and satisfied with it. Such a leader is always a fragile leader. You can see such leaders all around. Their crazy decisions, their uh, crazy positions about things, their reactions, they are quite problematic not for themselves but for the entire world around. That's what we have been seeing in recent times. One crazy man's decision has put so many lives in trouble, right? So that is how a fragile leadership is made, and that is what distinguishes a great leader from an ordinary leader, the element of self awareness. So, if you have to reflect at this point, which layer do you mostly identify yourself with? The simple terms could be the body, the emotions, the roles you play, or something deeper. Where is my authority coming from? Is it coming from the role that I carry? Is it coming from the other possessions that I have? Or where am I actually drawing that authority from? Is a question to reflect upon often, as we all have one or the other leadership roles wherever we are. So that's how self awareness makes a huge difference. Now, moving on to the second part of our discussion. Why is self awareness central to leadership? Is what we need to look into a little more. Okay. A leader at the end of the day is not simply someone who holds a position or shouts the loudest. Okay. That's what gives impression to many that, oh, a leader is someone who displays his authority often. But that is not the case. A leader is someone who influences, inspires, and guides others. But how can you inspire others if you yourself are lost in confusion? With every wave that comes, if you're tossed up, how can you have that stability to guide the others? Therefore, there are many stories again in the tradition which gives you an alternative perspective. For example, the story of King Janaka that comes in many places in the Upanishad and elsewhere. There is a reference to that story where which says that when his whole kingdom was burning, when his palace was burning, he did not lose his calm. He did what was supposed to be done, but with that deep sense of presence that was never lost. Therefore, Janaka is hailed as a Rajarshi. He was a king who had his duties, but he was also a Rishi, a seer, a wise presence. So that was how Janaka was, because he knew that palace may burn, but the self cannot be touched. His inner awareness gave him unshakable balance, and that balance made him a trustworthy leader. That's how the texts define him or describe him. Contrast this with leaders. I was just referring to someone a short while ago. Leaders who lack self awareness, they're reactive, ruled by anger, fear, or ego. They can't handle one feedback. They can't handle one unpleasant circumstance. They can't handle one small error. While one can understand the need for perfectionism, yet an inadvertent error caused by someone who is junior to them, it will completely put them off. Again, this happens because of the fragility that is coming from somewhere. Okay, so they're reactive, ruled by anger, or ruled by various kinds of fears, or their entire uh, authority is coming from the lower self or the ego. Therefore, there is a again a repeated caution that has been provided in Chanakya Niti Sutra and elsewhere, that one who cannot govern oneself cannot govern a kingdom. So it is very clear. Rajyasya Moolam in the Niti Sutra, Chanakya Niti Sutras is very clear, says Sanyama or discipline is the source from where one can draw one's authority as a king. And this is confirmed, accepted, as I was mentioning earlier, even in modern psychology, especially when we discuss about emotional intelligence. The ability to recognize and regulate our own emotions is considered to be the foundation of effective leadership. There's no doubt about it. In the tradition, our seers have called it samyama. They have called it by many names, but simply meaning mastery of the inner instruments of thought, feeling, and action. The three components of us: the thinking component, the feeling component, and the active component. What kind of mastery do we have over these three things? Therefore, authentic leadership flows not from authority but authenticity, and authenticity is always born out of self-awareness. I think this is something that we need to underline and keep. Leadership comes from authenticity, true leadership, and that authenticity is born out of self-awareness. If self-awareness is absent, then one can be in a leadership position, but that does not necessarily mean he or she is a leader. So now we have known the significance of self awareness in the Indian thought, and also looked into the connection between self awareness and leadership. Then we go to the most important part: how do we cultivate this? What does Indian thought, Indian tradition have to offer regarding cultivating self awareness? Because it's not enough to know. Again, this is another significant perspective or approach of the Indian tradition. No knowledge can be limited by cognitive understanding alone. All knowledge must necessarily culminate in one's experience. Learning should culminate in being. Unless it culminates there, then it's of no use. Okay, so if it has to culminate in one's being, then there must be some ways of acquiring it. So what are those tools? What does the tradition have to say about it? How do we cultivate self-awareness is the simple question. And here I can say with all authority that there is no other tradition which has invested so much in developing self-awareness. The detailed set of tools, techniques, practices in abundance. If you really have one place to point at, then that is the Bharatiya thought, because that has been the central investment of the Indian thought. So, what are these? First one, the whole gamut of yoga that we refer to. Many a times we limit yoga to asanas. While asanas are important aspect of yoga, yoga should not be and cannot be limited to asanas alone. Definitely, asanas also bring in awareness. They bring in the awareness of the physical dimension, the bodily awareness, sensory awareness. But there are other aspects too, aspects that are looked into by yoga. In fact, the very definition, the technical definition of yoga, as some of you might be aware of it, is yogaschitta vritti nirodha. What does it simply mean? It means when the mental chatter quiets, we see ourselves clearly. Vrit योगश्चित्तवृत्तिनिरोधः तदा द्रष्टुः स्वरूपे अवस्थानम. The drashta, the seer, resides in his essential nature, in the glory of his essential nature, when the movements of the mind are slowed down and stopped. This in fact is the technical definition of yoga. While asanas are there, asanas are also the tools to arrive at this state. So, starting from the body, going up to the mind, working with it, working with the layers of the mind is what we do in yoga. Therefore, you have pranayama as part of it. Asana, pranayama, dhyana are essential parts of yoga. You use breath. Okay. This is a significant insight that our tradition has developed. You look into many Upanishads, the reference comes again and again. What does it say? It says, see, if you have to control a kite, you cannot do so directly. Kite is flying somewhere high, wherever the wind is pushing it, the kite is flying. Do you have, do you hold the kite directly in your hand? No. If you hold the kite in your hand, then what's the fun of having a kite? There's no fun in. So you should let the kite go free so that it soars high and high. But even there, can you control it? Yes, you can do so by the thread or the sutra that you hold in your hands. Upanishad says, kite is the mind, the sutra is the prana. Working on your prana, working on your breath, working on your settled breath, working on various dimensions of your breath will help you gain mastery over your mind too. Again, this is not some euphoric or some utopian statement. There are umpteen studies that say that emotional regulation and the movement of breath are directly connected. The emotional states are linked with the breathing patterns. With change in emotional states, there are changes in breathing patterns. Therefore, if you have to bring in changes about your emotional states, you can easily work with your breathing patterns and thereby influence your emotional states as well. This is again no just plain statement. There are detailed ways, techniques, practices which can bring about this transformation. That is the entire world of pranayama. Today, it's only being studied, understood, appreciated by modern methodologies, modern tools, and modern science as well. So, you have pranayama as an elaborate set of practices and tools. Similarly, dhyana, which is again part of the yoga tradition, where you try to work with your mind directly, observing the waves that raise and the waves that collapse. What are the thoughts that are coming in? What are the thoughts that are going out? There are again multiple methods of meditation. There are passive meditation practices. There are dynamic meditation practices. There are meditation practices while you're sitting, standing, moving. So, in this manner, an elaborate set of practices have been developed. Again, getting into the details of each of these practices is beyond the scope of this talk, but all I want to say is that the tools are available to us if we are interested. Added to this is the whole emphasis on self inquiry. If you look into Vedanta, if you look into yoga, or if you look into the lives of great masters like Ramana Maharshi or someone, one question that is posed before you often is know yourself. If there is a question that is coming, where is this question coming from? Who is asking this question? Again and again, bringing back the spotlight on oneself. Okay, so this is an important aspect of self inquiry that is there. This question helps us peel away the layers of false identity that we carry, an important practice of the tradition. Similarly, the other one is swadhyaya or self study. While many explain swadhyaya as the study of the texts or the scriptures, no doubt it is true, but it cannot be limited to the study of scriptures alone. What do we do in swadhyaya? We use these texts, these sources, these books to reflect upon ourselves. One line, one verse, one statement is good enough to reflect and bring in more light about myself. So, reflection through scriptures, journaling, dialogue. In the previous session, you were looking into various aspects of communication where dialogue is a very important tool. A lot of these scriptures that we refer to, whether it is the Upanishads or the Gita or any other many important texts for that matter, they're all in the process of a dialogue that is happening between two people, three people, or important sets of people, right? So, using these textual sources for reflection about oneself, this is again a big marker of difference between the Eastern and the Western thought. In the Western thought or in the Western tradition, the text is important in itself because that is a revelation. It was revealed to some prophet, it was revealed to some person, therefore it holds the authority for its own sake. But in the Indian thought, it is important, it becomes helpful because it is, allows you or offers you an opportunity to reflect upon yourself. And through that, you arrive at certain deeper insights which are universal in nature. So, texts are instrumental here and not essential or the only sources the way you find them in the Western tradition. Right? So, texts offer you that opportunity to reflect upon. These act as mirrors to reveal what we generally miss. And the other element, which is equally important, especially for all of us who are involved in the world of work, is karma yoga or seva or service. Elevating our normal course of activity from a transactional level to a higher order exchange. So that is karma yoga, which exposes the fragility of our ego, tests our humility, and deepens our awareness. So, in all the spiritual tradition, seva is the most important component. Whatever you would have studied in a classroom, studied with the guru, studied in the scriptures, fine, they're all good concepts. But how does it fare when you're actually on the ground? All those things will be put into test when you are engaged in the work of seva. So therefore, these four broad set of tools that are made available to us in order to enhance our awareness in the tradition. What are they? I'm repeating. Yoga, when I say yoga, I refer to asana, I refer to pranayama, I refer to dhyana, that is meditation. So, three major kinds of engagements: engaging with the body, engaging with the breath, engaging with the mind directly. So, all that comes under the term yoga. Then I have self inquiry as a method provided by Vedanta, questioning where this emotion, this thought, this feeling is coming from. Then Swadhyaya, third one. How do these texts, these sources help me to reflect on my own nature? What are my patterns? How do I find out more about myself? So that is Swadhyaya. Then Seva or Karma Yoga or service, the fourth one, where I put these things into the world of work and see how I am doing there, right? So this is just a very initial list. I mean, one can spend days together on getting into the details of these practices, both in terms of what the scriptures have to say or what the tradition has to say on one hand, and we are fortunate enough that on the other hand today we have some of these elements being tested and being published in terms of scientific articles, universally accepted as to how these operate. So both of these are available to us at our disposal. That's the best part of our times. Fine. So when these elaborate tools are there, we move on to the last and the concluding part. How do we apply this in the modern world, the modern leadership context? Again, I don't have to go much in detail here because all of you largely coming from the management field, from the leadership field, you are much better experts on these areas. But just to reinforce them or just to uh, share it with all of you, this is the peak in a way of the VUCA world. All of us are familiar with the VUCA world. So I don't think in last 20, 30 years, if we reflect, if we look back, there is no other period as volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous the kind that with the kind of times that we live in. All of us discuss about AI and its implications. All of us discuss about one man's decisions on visas, on tariffs, and so many things. Many people who were boarding the flight had to stop back, right? One decision, one pronouncement had such a big impact on so many lives. We don't even know what all will follow. So I don't think there was any other period which can be characterized as volatile as the times that we are in. A couple of wars are going on in different parts of the world. We don't know what or how that tomorrow will shape up. So everything is uncertain. And imagine when the situation itself is so uncertain, you have a crazy leader heading places and people. It couldn't be more problematic than anything else, right? So, therefore, we it is always good to have a leadership which is rooted in self awareness, and anyone who is rooted in self awareness normally comes with these three strengths. One is clarity of purpose, that is dharma. The dharma framework will be there, doing what is right and not just what is popular. We have seen such leaders. When many leaders take the refuge of popular decisions, there are a few leaders that we can look up to even in these times who have taken some bold decisions despite attracting various kinds of comments, observations, accusations, yet they have stood their ground because they felt that is the best thing for the entire population. So that is clarity of purpose. Then resilience, titiksha. Okay, first one is dharma, second one is titiksha, that is enduring success and failure with balance. I mean, we have heard about the leadership of ISRO and elsewhere, how these leaders were so magnanimous in accepting both success and failure. When success came in, they passed on to their juniors. When failure came in, they took the accountability on themselves. This really requires a great degree of self awareness for someone to do this. And then equanimity or samatvam or balance, saying staying centered amidst all these highs and lows. So think of so many leaders, whether it was Vikram Sarabhai or many other leaders who led these space movements and other movements, or Swami Vivekananda, whether they're in the spiritual field, political field, or in any scientific fields. We are fortunate to see such leaders who were deeply rooted in self awareness. And that's where, if we look into Swami Vivekananda's life, Swami Vivekananda's fearlessness came from his deep conviction in the self. There's a very interesting anecdote. Maybe with that I will conclude my sharings. It so happens, probably this was in 1890s when he was traveling in the US. um, he was giving his talks all over the country in US, and he was speaking about courage in some place in Texas. You can imagine the state of affairs today. When you can see the state of affairs today, you can only imagine what would have been the state about 200 years ago there, right? So there was one man, a crazy man, who who felt that, okay, this person is speaking about courage, let me test it. So he took out his gun and started shooting towards Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda did not budge an inch. He continued with his speech. And this man was finally convinced, here we have a man who speaks what he believes in. So the anecdote states that these cowboys who were there, some of them carried Swami Vivekananda, and they were just celebrating all around for a while, looking at this kind of a personality. So his fearlessness came from the deep conviction about the self that he had. And today, fortunately, this dimension, which was hitherto neglected or not recognized and realized, is coming back to our consideration. Many global corporations are beginning to rediscover these principles. Probably would have come across mindfulness practices, this kind of training, that kind of the training for their executives, for their leadership, where there is a felt need to bring in this dimension. Therefore, these leadership retreats happen, mindfulness programs are happening. Mindfulness program is nothing but the same Indian thought being sanitized and packaged in a Western outfit and presented to the world as one of the best tools of our times. That is all mindful leadership is about. Okay, but in essentially, it is nothing but a leadership that comes from deep rooted self awareness, that is leadership from within. So coming back to our earlier question, where we all begin from, the hardest person that we would have to lead is ourselves. But when you do that, when you gain mastery from within, everything else follows. From Swarajya comes Samrajya. Therefore, self awareness is not optional for leadership, it is the foundation. Without it, leadership is fragile. With it, leadership is fearless. This is what Krishna emphasizes in the Gita in many places, but more so in the sixth chapter, starting from the verses 18 and going up to 20, 21, even up to 24. You can see some beautiful verses. He starts with this line in the 18th verse. He says, Yada viniyatam chittam atmanyevavatisthate. When the mind is stilled and rests in the self. And then he goes on explaining many parts. And there is one verse he says, Sukhena Brahma Samprashnam Atyantam Sukhamashnute. And also there is one more place in the 21st verse he says, Sukham Atyantikam Yattat Buddhigrahyam Atindriyam Vetti Yatra na Chaivayam Stitaschalati Tattvataha. When the mind is stilled and rests in the self, The leader experiences unshakable clarity, that is, Veti Stitaschalati. He stands unshakable. Sukham Atyantikam. He experiences joy unexplainable. So, this is true leadership, and that is leading from within. So, namaste. With this, I'll conclude my presentation. If there are any questions, observations, comments, I'm open to be with you all. And I'm thankful to SES, Gaurish, and all the friends at SES for giving me this opportunity to share a few words, a few ideas that have always fascinated me from the Indian tradition before you. Thank you. Namaste.
Dhanyavad, Vinayachandra ji. We will
Hope
take
the
the
audio
question.
was clear and it was not problematic.
Yes, yes, it was very clear. It was very clear. So, coming to the questions, Mr. Sudarshan has a question about how can we relate Triguna with self-awareness?
See, the three gunas that we speak about are sattva, rajas, and tamas. The three gunas are the essential characteristics of every personality or every being, and there is no hierarchy about these gunas in themselves. They have a specific role to play and specific purpose to achieve. Every movement that happens within oneself towards light, lightness, knowledge, all these are the expressions of sattva guna. Any activity, creativity, dynamism, movement, energy is the expression of rajasika guna. Anything that is brought to a closure, anything that stand still, anything that gets closed, anything that cuts off, all these are expression of tamo guna. Each guna has a role to play. So knowing the tendencies of these gunas and also knowing the dominance of my trait. Am I sattva dominated? Am I rajoguna dominated? Am I tamoguna dominated? And how can I make a conscious shift from one to the other? If imagine what happens in the night, you're into overthinking, you're thinking about something so much that you don't get sleep. So what is actually happening there? Rajoguna has overtaken tamoguna. If tamoguna would have naturally allowed its space, then the mind should have shut down and you should have gone into sleep. That is not happening because rajoguna is active when it is not supposed to be. In the morning, sattva is naturally to be active. In that place, if tamoguna holds the position, then I'm not able to get up, I'm not able to remember things, I'm not able to get connected to what I'm supposed to do. So, understanding the play of the gunas, which is dominant constitution is very helpful.
Thank you, Vinayachandra ji. The next question is about how to understand self-awareness of oneself related to emotional decisions by Dr. Satvik.
Can you repeat the question again?
How to understand self-awareness of oneself, which is related to emotional decisions.
Fine. See, if I am aware about my emotional play, how does an emotion hold me? What are the patterns that I regularly fall into? Let me give you one simple example and come back. Each one of us are a bundle of patterns, and these patterns repeat often. I am an expression of a particular bundle. The other person is also an expression of another set of bundles of patterns, and it is actually not between two persons but an interaction between two set of patterns. if I can see this way, then I can also see what are those points or what are those patterns within me which trigger something. What are those patterns within me which can connect with the other person? So, understanding these kinds of relationships and exchanges will help me to locate myself better. I mean, it's quite possible for some of us that if there is a trigger that is happening there, I can already see, okay, this is where it is starting, maybe I should do something about it. If I can see the distance between a trigger that is coming there and myself here, then probably there is something that I can do about it. This distance is necessary. What happens initially is that we don't see that distance at all. We only realize that the trigger was there only after we have reacted to that. But if there is a possibility of looking at that set of patterns which trigger me, then I have a space in between, and that space gives me little more control. So, understanding my emotional pattern, and again, just like the gunas, understanding how these emotions interact with one another, and specifically my patterns. I think this will help me to regulate my emotions better. If I'm not able to regulate my emotions better, even then I know, okay, what kind of emotional uh, coordinates are helpful in dealing with this particular situation. If I know a person, someone who is known for pressing the trigger button, and I know what exactly and when it exactly it gets triggered, then I know how not to give that situation into his hand. So, in this manner, knowing our patterns, emotional patterns, is very helpful.
Thank you, Vinayji. There is another question from Syed Wasim Hanif Hasina about Bharatiya Self-Awareness Guide. How can Bharatiya self-awareness lead us to authentically lead life in today's digital age? So I think the person is asking
Authentically.
how to lead authentically. I think about the leadership traits, how to lead
No,
an
I
authentic
missed the last part. Huh.
digital age. It's about today's digital age, how to lead
Okay,
authentically.
fine. If I understand the question correctly, in this new age, which is characterized by the presence of technology, with the presence of AI, and so many other features connected with technology, how does this thought offer us that kind of foundation? Right? I think, in fact, this is required the most in these times, because the kind of distraction that we have is enormous. All of us do carry the mobile phones, and fortunately enough, in the mobile phone you have a, uh um, set of data that will tell you as to how many hours or what was the duration that you spent on your phone each day, and the average number of hours every week, right? So what does it tell about us? Sometimes we end up spending 3 to 4 hours on another mobile phone, not just for the work, keeping the work part aside, scrolling, checking out, looking into things. What is your Facebook? Facebook is nothing but to know, peeping into other people's life. What is LinkedIn? LinkedIn is all about your achievements and your ego statements. What is Instagram? Creating envy in the minds of other people, right? So when you have these kinds of asuric tendencies, which is so much powerfully presented before us, the distractions are much more, the confusions are much more. I mean, just look at some of the newses that have come in last couple of years. There are youngsters who have committed suicide because they were not able to grow their followership on Instagram. This might be an extreme case. Examples are generally extreme, but the condition is not untrue in the sense that there is a general requirement in most of the people who are on the social media to have that kind of following, to have a kind of affirmation from outside, some kind of conformity, some kind of display nature. All these are very much part of our requirements of for the youth today. In that context, if you help them to identify that your real identity is not dependent on these, whether someone likes your post or not, someone likes your images or not, your true self identity remains independent of the number of likes that you have got. I mean, I'm just giving you one or some examples here, but if someone can be shown, especially our youngsters, our youth, if they can be shown the path to find the locus back into oneself, I think then we are empowering a whole generation, and that is the reason why I feel this is required more than ever in the current times.
Thank you, Vinayji. We are closing the questions for the day. On behalf of all present here, I sincerely thank Vinayachandra ji for his inspiring lecture. What is self awareness? Why is self awareness important to leadership? How can we practically implement these principles? All these words he has given us today has reminded us that true leadership begins with self awareness and inner strength. We are very grateful for the clarity and wisdom he has shared with us today. Thank you, Vinayji, once again. And on behalf of CES and ICFAI, I would like to express my gratitude to all the participants who have joined us today. So we will see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. with two more interesting lectures like these. Happy Navaratri to all of you and have a nice evening. Shubharatri.